Okay, anybody have a guess as to what the next words that are going to go up here are going to say?
No, yeah,
Are those consistent lessons?
no, contradictions.
What goes with this one?
Opposites attract.
Maybe, but that's not, right? Out of sight, out of mind, right? We have these cultural aphorisms, right, that are self-contradictory. So, here's some more. Right, for virtually any cultural lesson we might learn that can be reduced to an aphorism, we can come up with an opposite that taken alone seems equally true. I particularly like the last one, it seems classic, because it's about horses and stuff. Okay, so when I was at the University of Wisconsin and building the entrepreneurship program there, I had people constantly telling me, listen, just bring in entrepreneurs to tell their heroic stories of what they did and get these students enthused and allow the students to sort of understand the lessons that can come from it. And so I was like, there were lots of entrepreneurs around who were willing to come and talk to lessons, so I did that. After the first year, I was like, I'm not smart enough to integrate the different lessons that they're telling me for things that people should do. And so as people continue saying this is what I should do, I did this fully informing the people I was bringing in. I said, listen, you know, you have your story contrasts greatly, Joe, with your story, Susan. And so I want to have Joe come in this week and tell his story, and then have Susan come in the next week and tell her story, and ask the students to sort of think about what combined lessons they can learn from this. And so what comes next is a list of 4 contrasting lessons that I wrote down on about 20 contrasting lessons during the time I was doing this. I posit that this follows an identical logic to haste makes waste versus a stitch in time saves 9. Right? Stay focused. Versus, well, you don't really know what you're doing, you start out, so you have to explore new opportunities, right? The new word is pivot. I hate this word, right? But the thing is, you can't stay focused because you have to know when to pivot, right? So it's the same sort of thing, right? Avoid undercapitalization, right? Successful businesses go out of business because they run out of money and they go bankrupt and they can't pay their bills, right? So avoid undercapitalization. Right? So no, run lean, right? Running lean, right? Keeps you on edge, keeps you from wasting resources, right? It allows you to pivot more easily when you got to pivot, right? Get to market first, right? Now shows about no, right? What happens to pioneers? Right, they get slaughtered, right? So no, be a fast follower, right? If you can find successful entrepreneurs who say, I was a pioneer, that's why I got there. Others who say, be a fast follower, right? Focus on capability development. Figure out what you want to be good at and do that versus outsource everything. Right? Outsource everything as long as you can, right? So these are the lessons the students learn. Right? The fact is you cannot figure out what it is, what path people should follow to become successful entrepreneurs simply from talking to successful entrepreneurs. Now there are lots of psychological reasons to this, right? All of us have personal narratives for our success and failure, where our success is primarily due to things we did with maybe a little bit of luck. Where somebody watching us might say, there's a little more luck there than that person thinks. And those of us, right, we tend to explain our failures in terms of external circumstances, right, that occurred to us. So we were doing our best, but things just went badly for us. So good things, not luck, bad things, bad luck, right? This is a universal, right, human information processing and explanation, attribution bias that everybody does this. Entrepreneurs are no different. They may be more subject than other people. So when you ask them to explain their success, they are, despite their intelligence, their discipline, their rigor, their decency, not very good at actually telling you what it is that it takes to succeed, which is the reason why we do research on this. So what does this mean? So most research, most entrepreneurship, in most places and most times occurs under resource constraints. How often have you had an entrepreneur come to you and say, wow, I just have too much money? It's like, really different. It's like, you know, like there's too much seed capital in this area. You know, when a new idea comes out of the university, people are just piling the cash on them. And that's why it's so easy to grow and get to the point where you can really get some serious stuff going. Anybody heard anyone say that? If you have, I want to live exactly where you live. I'm moving into your house. Okay, so this is understanding options for and outcomes for responding to resource constraints is a fundamental question in entrepreneurship research. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own research and my attempts to grapple this. This is what I study. I study understanding options for and outcomes from responding to resource constraints. I'm going to do this to try to explain how and why it is we do research in entrepreneurship. You listening, Ron? Right? This is Kailicha. This is an informal settlement of 1.5 million people just next to the airport in Cape Town, South Africa. I have 4 PhD students I supervise who are doing work in this area. I've been doing work over here for about 5 years. Now, why would I go to one of the most resource-constrained places on the face of the earth to try to study entrepreneurship? Right, because if I can understand how entrepreneurs manage to accomplish something in this environment, under the assumption that there's theoretical generalizability, that I can develop causal theory that explains the relationship between resource constraints, behaviors, and outcomes. This is a microcosm of the much more complicated institutional world we live in here, right? To try to focus in on just what it takes under very stark circumstances to do this, right? So this is, just to give you a sense, this is outside of Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch, South Africa, it's the wine country, if you ever have a chance to visit. It's just unbelievably beautiful, right? But you know, it has the highest, South Africa has the highest Gini coefficient in the world, right? It is the most unequal society. So what you have is really rich people next to really, really poor people. So if you look out towards the hills there are all these beautiful wine estates. But this is an informal settlement that there's a constant risk of being plowed under by the government. It's about 10,000 people who live there. It is actually the global center for amoebic dysentery in the world. Does everybody know what dysentery is? Right? Amoebic dysentery means you never get rid of it. The amoeba is in you forever. It never goes away. There are 10,000 people living here. There are 3 toilets that are the equivalent of porta-johns. There is no other sanitation here. There are no flush toilets. 10,000 people, world center of amoebic dysentery, no flush toilets. Think about it for just, I'm sorry, I know you're eating lunch, right? So one time when I was over there, I was dealing with some folks from our College of Engineering who had a bunch of like free solar panels. They're trying to find some way to help somebody with a solar panel. Solar panels are important in this environment because there's no electricity, and if kids want to be able to study it, these things always crop up next to schools because the parents want their kids to be able to go to school. So they, these are found materials that they put this together. The kids can't really study at night because there's no light, so the solar panels can help do this. So I'm walking around with some people from Brown University, and I'm looking to figure out, okay, what can we do with solar panels here? Look around, it's very sunny, right? So solar panels are good. And I see one. This is the only one in this informal settlement, so I'm thinking, like, what's going on? People there don't speak much English. They speak sort of a variety of languages I don't speak. And there's some woman who has a sock washing business, right? Right here. What she does is when people wander through, she comes up and says, can I wash your socks? Can I wash your socks? Right? Trying to make that. And so sort of took about 15 minutes to get to it. I said, why is this the only solar panel? The answer was, not in English, because he's the meanest son of a bitch in the valley, right? Anybody else who had a solar panel there, it would be stolen or destroyed, vandalized, sort of thing, but nobody was going to mess with this guy, right? This tells you what the institutional environment is like for trying to run a business. It's not only poor, it's not only not electricity, it's not only not sanitation, but the sort of the government institutions and enforcements we count on here, right? Enforceable contractual rights, physical safety, right? Property safeguards and so forth are completely missing from this environment. So, so I also study resilience. This is back in Kailicha, the big one near the airport. These are the school kids doing a project where they decided to go around and try to paint some of the shacks around them. So it gives you a sense of, of the spirit of the people who are living in these things despite this. So back in 2005, trying to start to explain this, I did a study. It was actually it was in southern Illinois. It was towns where strip mines had been constructed and then abandoned. So it's a study of entrepreneurship in ex-strip mining villages, towns in southern Illinois. And so I borrowed this concept from cultural anthropology called bricolage, which Reed Nelson and I defined as making do by applying combinations of resources at hand to new problems and opportunities. Now this paper is the reason why I'm a full professor at NC State, because it has been the highest impact paper published in the field of entrepreneurship in the last decade. So over 900 papers have been written using our concept, trying to study a variety of things. This is recognized as a fundamental behavior that entrepreneurs engage in trying to deal with resource constraints. So here's an example of some research on bricolage. This is in an informal settlement near Pretoria, South Africa. And this guy's name is Jacob. I'm going to tell you a story about Jacob's business, and my argument is that if Jacob were an RTP, all of us would work for him. Okay, so this is, you walk into, and if you spend any time in emerging economies, you see lots of people who are backyard mechanics, right? People are trying to have cars, they obviously can't buy new cars, and so there's lots of people sort of learn how to, fiddle with wrenches and fix cars and stuff. So when you're walking through it and you see this guy, you don't really, it's nothing unusual. So I'm walking through here, and that's his shack right there, with the circle on the door. And I sort of knock and stick my head in. There's 7 guys sitting on a bench. 6 of them are smoking dope. And one is standing, sort of talking to them. I'm thinking, well, this is not that unusual. And these guys have been unemployed for their entire life, right? They sort of, how you doing? And so Jacob walks out and says, oh, what are you doing? I said, I'm just seeing what sort of entrepreneurial stuff is going on here. And he goes, let me tell you about my business. I said, okay. I look outside, and we walk over here, and there's a guy who's pounding on a piston with a rock. Right? He's got the head off the engine, sitting there. I'm like, okay, this is a little unusual. You have more primitive tools than I'm accustomed to seeing. So it tells me a story. His story is he grew up in this settlement. He got very lucky. When he was a teenager, a local Ford dealership hired him to sweep up. Right, so to go in there and clean things up, clean up after the mechanics and so forth. They got to know him and trust him. They allowed him to park a junk car outside of the thing and to use tools from the dealership to work on it, to try to make himself a workable car. And he sort of learned how to do this. Eventually they hired him in to do simple things like oil changes and brake jobs and so forth in the Ford dealership. As soon as he became competent, that he said, I'm going to do my own business. I'm going to go help my own community. He quit that and he moved back into the settlement and started training other people who were in the settlement to be mechanics, right? He trained his brother, who now lives in another settlement in the Western Cape, who is doing the same sort of thing. Jacob employs, this was 4 years ago, at that point he employed 29 people, right? And now not paying them a lot of money, but giving people a paycheck doing this. So I'm like, okay, well that's really kind of interesting, and it's like, if you look just over there, there's several burned cars. In the settlement areas, they can't actually get fire trucks in because of how things have been just sort of built wherever it would go. So when there's a fire, what they do is they cordon off the area and they spray water in from the outside. He had 2 people's cars there when the last fire came that burned, which means he owes those people cars. So what he's doing, he has no insurance, obviously. People don't have insurance here. So what he's doing with these 2 cars is he's building cars to replace the ones that burned that he now owes the other people. Okay, I've heard this story 100 times. Then he said, well, let me tell you what I'm doing. So this is a Toyota Cressida, right? It's popularly known as a cockroach in South Africa. And so in downtown Cape Town, you have taxi cabs that look just like taxi cabs we'd have here. They're licensed the same way. He was also in the picture I showed earlier. So in order to be a licensed cabbie in Cape Town, you have to go through testing, you have to know your way around, your car has to pass safety inspections, you have to pay for a medallion. It's not that much sort of thing. But outside of the city limits, in the settlement areas, it's kind of anything goes, right? So they don't enforce the things there. But as Jacob said to me, the women who are waiting on the street corner here, who need to get around and bringing their kids into a car, they actually care about their kids' safety just like the women in Cape Town care about the, you know, the safety and the welfare areas. He said, so I started thinking about this, and he said, I know everything there is to know about a Toyota Crescent. He said, I can take 10 of them and put them together and make one. And he said, I decided what I would do is I would try to become the preferred mechanic for cockroaches in southern South Africa. I said, so what I did is I said, I will only work on your vehicle if as part of that you allow me to make it safe, right? So you can't come to me and say, hey, fix my windshield, unless you're also going to let me and pay me to fix your brakes, right? So that I'm not going to let any car go out of here that I've worked on without the feeling that the car will actually be safe. You forget it. And he did this, and people came to him, and what he did is he had these orange stickers printed that he had put in the rear passenger side window, so that anybody who's waiting on the street for one of these to go by can see the orange sticker and say, you know, I want that taxi, that cockroach, not the other one, right? His business boomed, right, which is how he hired some of these people. Given that we have no intellectual property protections or other contractual enforcement in the area, what's the next thing that happened? Everybody printed orange stickers, right? So that all of the cars had orange stickers that looked a lot like his, right? They copied his orange stickers and did that. So he's in this constant race, right, to have other symbols on his cars and so forth. So I'm thinking, okay, that's, you know, that's pretty entrepreneurial as we think about it back here. And I said, thank you for telling me a story, that's great. And I'll continue. I said, no, let me tell you what I'm doing now, right? So he said he went to the public library, and he got out a book that shows the regulations for licensing a taxi in Cape Town. And he said, I think I can do this to a cockroach. He said, I think I can get a cockroach to pass the regulations for doing this. So he brought in 2 of his favorite cockroach drivers and brought them in, and they hatched a plan to do this. They got training documents so they could pass the test and so forth, and while they studied to be able to pass the test, he took 2 cockroaches and for the first time ever had these cars pass the licensing thing. The difference in price per kilometer for a licensed taxi in Cape Town versus the price for a cockroach in the settlement areas is more than 10 to 1, right? Overnight, he increased the income of his customers more than tenfold by doing this. So, that's the end of the story I'm going to talk about. But like, what do you think? What do you think this guy could do if he were in our environment? Right? Right? Do you think he'd be successful working here with the advantage any one of us have here? So what I'm trying to do in my research is understand what it is that allows somebody like Jacob, under these multi-various resource and institutional constraints, to succeed, because the more I can learn about that, I believe, the more I can teach my students to become successful entrepreneurs despite the various institutional and resource constraints they will inevitably face. Does that make sense? I find Jacob's story inspiring. I go back and visit him sometimes just to talk to him and hang out, and you know, I don't usually visit him in his shack because there's a lot of the same stuff going on as when I first got there. So that's basic research. That's fundamental, basic social science research. This is a friend of mine at Imperial College in London, and I got a grant from the United Nations to go study rural health clinics in India, which are extraordinarily resource constrained, in particular to focus on the clinics that work with the prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. So if you have a woman who's HIV positive who's given birth in the United States, the chances that she's going to pass HIV along to her newborn is extraordinarily small because of the regimen of antiretroviral drugs that we provide. And then the chances that she's going to pass it on to the child through breastfeeding is also extraordinarily small. Unfortunately, if you don't follow the regimen strictly, and if those drugs aren't available and given routinely, the chances of transmission go up to over 20%, right, in these rural environments. So India's put these health clinics on there. Unfortunately, so we did it up the southern coast of India, ending with a few days in Kolkata. Going out and just talking to the people who are here, observing what's going on and so forth. And then we applied the theory of bricolage to what we saw there and came up with a best practices system for how these people who are understaffed, under-resourced in every way, did not have the ability to actually reach out to the environment, and came up with a plan for how it is that sort of the best practices for how they should do this, which in most of these cases has actually been implemented. Right? So this is taking the fundamental research and applying it in a very direct way. A second way we're applying this is, so my ex-doctoral student, Erin Powell, who is one of the 10 best young entrepreneurship researchers in the world, and is perhaps the best textile management researcher on the face of the earth, who worked here till recently, and I are doing a series of studies of entrepreneurship in the textile industry, right? So you think about when we first started doing that, and she knew textile stuff, I'm interested in textile stuff because I grew up in New England around old mills that had closed down when the industry moved south, right? So we decided we would study resourcefulness and bricolage in the textile industry. When we first started saying this, we said, we actually talked to people on the College of Textiles and said, yeah, we're going to study textile entrepreneurship. The first response was literally, isn't that an oxymoron? Right? Number one, nobody thinks of textile people as being entrepreneurial. Number two, it's all shutting down, right? It's all going to Honduras, then China, then Africa. We're not doing that anymore, right? It turns out there's just a rich proliferation of textile entrepreneurship going on here, and in fact in New England as well. So we have a series of papers where we're studying this and figuring out what's going on with it. So the first one, this founder identity thing, has just been published in the very best academic journal in management across the field, right? This is completely unheard of, right? We have a series of other papers. So the other way we're applying this is in North Carolina to try to study how we can have a resurgence of some of the traditional industries. We have studies going on in rural parts down east to try to figure out how it is that we can generate economic and social development through textile production and all things. Okay, so this is getting a sense of how this kind of fits together. Nonetheless, when somebody walks into one of us, to me, I mean Louis knows all of the answers, but or to Natchiket, or to me, or any of the other faculty who are involved, says, listen, I've got this stuff I want to do and I don't have the resources to do it, what should I do? Right? The fact is, we do not in virtually any case know what the correct answer is. We know a lot of different options, a lot of different combinations. We typically know more than the person who's asking us, and we don't think that our advice actually causes them harm. But we don't know the right answer, right? So, like if somebody's right, should they bootstrap? Should they use their credit card? Should they take another mortgage? Should they raise money from friends, families, and pools? Should they don't present to angels? Should they position themselves for VC money or not, right? Should they be changing what they offer for products? Should they be going after different markets or customers or suppliers, right? These are all things where we have ideas, right? We have the equivalent of cultural aphorisms about what it is they should do, right? And then, frequently, actually, the most frequent good advice we can give most startup entrepreneurs is, I hope you've had fun, but the best thing you can do is shut this down before you spend the rest of your life savings and those of your friends on this venture that's bound to fail. Right? We're going to start a clinic, and we're going to offer services for students, for faculty, for members of the community who are engaged in entrepreneurial activities. Right? We're going to have a walk-in clinic where somebody can say, I have this issue, I'm trying to do this, can you help me? Most of the time we won't be able to help them on the spot. Sometimes we can. There'll be an MBA or an undergraduate student who will take a little information from them, and we'll figure out whose expertise we can bring to bear to try to figure out what this is. We're going to engage in what's called action research, which is we are going to work with them to try to help them figure out how to solve their issue and to help them execute against that advice as well as we can. And we're going to